So, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Everyone wants AI for enterprise, but no one knows how to use it. Kind of a tongue-in-cheek title today. I'm Rebecca, and I'm your moderator for the webinar today. We have a really exciting session planned where we will tackle one of the biggest challenges that we see enterprises facing right now: how to actually implement and use AI effectively in your business. So today we'll cover some brief introductions. We'll go over some AI enterprise concerns that might be on your mind. We'll demonstrate some ways to deploy LLMs and AI layers. We'll introduce a really interesting tool to you that you can actually deploy now and start seeing the benefits of now. Then we'll jump into a demo, and then we'll have a time for a Q&A session. So throughout the webinar, if you do have any questions, we'll ask that you please enter them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen so that we can address them during the Q&A section. So joining us today is Johnny Than, CEO and founder of Appficiency. Johnny brings 20 plus years of SaaS experience, and he actually started his AI journey in neural networks in 1999. He's consulted and delivered over 400 successful projects for thousands plus customers, focusing on the mid-market all the way up to Fortune 500s. We're also joined by Carlos Palacio, CEO of Snap-on Software. Carlos brings over 25 years of global tech leadership skills, driving innovation and client-focused solutions. Right now, he leads software operations at Snap-on Software, delivering transformative software across systems such as NetSuite, Microsoft ecosystems globally. Let me give everyone a quick introduction of our group of companies. So on the slide here, you can see we've got quite a few logos. So Appficiency started as a NetSuite consulting practice in 2014 and has quickly grown into a group of companies offering services and products across a business's entire tech stack. So Appficiency Private Equity handles our mergers and acquisition activities. Root Digital Advisors represents our collective service offerings across all of our Appficiency group of companies. Then we have Snap-on Software, which Carlos leads, focusing on governance and productivity for Microsoft 365 products, and then Nimbus, and also products for NetSuite and Salesforce. And then Nimbus Point delivers Salesforce consulting services. And then, of course, Appficiency focused on consulting and technology services, specifically for ERP. Then we have our newest and most exciting addition, which is Ask Cipher, the AI-powered platform that acts as a layer across all of your biz apps, enabling you to use natural language to query data, create records, automate workflows, and more. So let's dive into the heart of today's discussion. Johnny, everyone's talking about AI for business. What are the real concerns that enterprises are facing?
Great question, Rebecca. And with the productivity paradox that many have heard about, and it's interesting to note that, famously, Boston Consulting Group came out with the first major statistic that people still quote today, which is already debunked by about 12 months, was that 95% of AI projects return no ROI at all. And so now with 72% of firms now measuring ROI for AI and seeing some positive returns, the challenge isn't the belief in it anymore. It's the complexity. And how do we get to valuable use cases? How do we deploy a breadth of use cases? And against that, there's a variety of business impacts that they're trying to really deal with. One is the implementation lag. In the past, many of the AI projects, if you think about the Coheres and Palantirs of the world, the implementation lag is months, maybe years, to implement a massive customized LLM. Well, that's changed, and so how does that implementation lag affect the business impact here? How do you measure ROI on an AI deployed project or tool? And the measurement challenge could be from, if we have the same people and they can do more, well, how much more can they actually do? And how do you measure that until you actually either grow as a business or you take a swag of what that number might be? You also see shifting workloads. And so people moving their workload from document heavy work to now the thinking heavy work. And so it's funny to note that even for us, we've seen our consultants go from having to be more rote and process and procedurally oriented to now going back to almost like liberal education, thinking creatively and being able to think strategically, so because the AI can do a lot of the heavy lifting on the rote and procedural work. Of course, what happens for everybody, as soon as they see some value, they get excited, and then they hit their own wall, which is that incomplete process redesign. They really don't know how to redesign their process. It feels like the landscape and capabilities shift every day. How do you redesign a process that's got a moving target? And of course, you have the human element, like it or not, which is early stage adoption issues. If you give people a great tool, we've seen it already in just our 6 months of beta. You give them a great tool, and the first question is like, what do I do with this thing? Instead of thinking about their hardest problem, saying, can I do that with this thing? And so that becomes a real game changer for the human adoption and change management. The change management is less about conforming to the new procedure, and it's more about being creative in their thinking and applying that and having someone help them create the procedure with AI out of it. And then lastly, I think there's a lot of emphasis over on automation rather than upskilling. The AI can automate things, yes, absolutely. And there's a lot of value in the automation, but the value in the automation existed more than 10 years ago when you started hearing about RPA and you started hearing about machine automation, on and on. So the answer isn't actually more automation today. The answer is actually upskilling on what the AI should be able to tackle. And so those enterprise concerns are very real and significant when it comes to how to, how should you and how can you adopt AI in the enterprise? Now, the primary bases of friction that you have to tackle are these three. And this is an excellent way to just really look at it very, very carefully. There's a human friction, an organizational friction, and a technical friction. The human friction is not just a resistance of habit and normal change management. It's actually because everybody suddenly becomes a little mini leader and they have to train their agent to do what they want it to. That's a very different skill for the vast majority of the workforce. And so it forces that when you remove that human friction, if you want to adopt generative AI and get ROI from your AI project, it really forces everybody to buy in that AI is the way to do this particular task or department or function of the business. And it ensures that the tools are used meaningfully, and that means everyone's inspecting the tool use all the time, and they live and breathe inside of that. Organizational friction is another big one, because if you talk about automating a part of the business, or you talk about even changing what a part of the business can do, there's a threat to the business overall cohesion of process, never mind the people and the departments and the budgets and all the other stuff that comes along with it. And actually what we've seen is, surprisingly, not that people are worried about the impact of the department, although that is a big one. It's also that the AI can do so much, and it's easy for the AI to break things. And so governance and how you control the AI is actually becoming as center stage as the ROI of the AI. So we see people starting to trade off some ROI to get better control and governance in their organization. And then technical friction is a big one. A lot of people that were early adopters, they're using products that are wide open and they're really genericized for the public consumption, but they're not proper for the enterprise AI consumption. And because of that, the tool lacks adaptability, which is one of the major things that enterprises need. They need unique things done uniquely for them. And they have very complex flows. It's not simple. A connected biz app in a consumer world is like connect to my Expedia and my email. In an enterprise situation, man, that's a whole different discussion. And so it's not at all the same thing. So those three frictions, if you get past them, then you get to real ROI.
Excellent. Thank you, Johnny. Now, Carlos, can you walk us through how data impacts AI functionalities?
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. And connected to the frictions, we have the domain of the data. And AI operates across 4 data domains because AI is only as good as the data that it can access. And this continue to be true all the way. Hopefully, we are familiar with the first two that are well known. That is the public data, information about us that is publicly available or semi-consent available. And most of the AI models have access and have been trained from that particular data. Then the second one is the private data, is the data that exists in our systems, in the systems of our company, or in our machines, and that is key competitive advantage that organizations have until now, and include your customer records, your financial information, your operational metrics. So those are the two traditional that we are very used to see. But nowadays with AI, we are starting to see a third domain in the data universe that was always there at the background, but now finally is being come to light and is very present with AI, which is the process data. Is all the knowledge that we have gathered as a humans and as a corporation about how a job is done, how we are actively and effectively doing the things that we do in an organization. This is often the most overlooked, but nowadays is the most valuable one in the era of AI, and is how behind your business operates and take advantage of every single process. Now, there is a fourth one that we are actively working in a Cipher and with Appficiency, and there we will be probably having a separate webinar about it, but it's how the AI must integrate all these three domains and is generating a new data domain as well.
That context is really helpful to set the scene. So now, Johnny, there's a lot of confusion in the market about different types of AI solutions. Can you help us understand the landscape?
Absolutely. And in all fairness, we were confused too when we started. When we started maybe almost 2 years ago now, what is AI? What's not AI? What types of AI is out there? And I think many people are still confused. So let's break it down into 4 major categories here that will really help people understand it. LLMs as large language models as agents. This is your most publicly obvious ones: ChatGPT, Claude from Anthropic, Gemini from Google, DeepSeek from China, and so on and so forth, Perplexity, etc. These large LLM agents, they are primarily built on the public domain of data. They don't have a ton of private data. Their primary value comes from their weights and balances that they use to define how the agent interacts with you. And of course, there is some private data that they're fed, maybe lots, but for the most part, it's a mix of the public data that they're primarily trying to get their arms wrapped around. And that's beneficial to everybody. However, these LLM agents in the past, especially without a direct application access, are a very different breed than those that have an application access. And so that moves us into kind of the second column. The second column is LLMs that have app connections and memory. Now you start to get some interesting use cases really out of it for the enterprise. The LLM can learn continuously from its interactions. You get multiple applications with a unified access layer. Many applications and LLMs are already touting access to 100, 1,000 biz apps, or 1,000 websites and services and so on and so forth. And they're doing it through a variety of ways, which Carlos will talk about. But the LLMs plus the app connections and memory are primarily the concept that if I gave you a screwdriver or one toolbox, that you'd be able to build a house. And although that's true, it's not the most efficient way to build a house, right? We really need certain specific tools if I'm building a house. And that same toolbox should not be probably used to build a tractor. And so although you can do a generic tool to build all these different things, it's not actually the best way for an enterprise to go about it. It might be okay for an individual casual user, but the enterprise needs to be fast, efficient, provide value to its end customer. And so it needs more tailored experience. And so that led us to a breed of what we call in-app agents. And in-app agents have the biggest and deepest technical connection to their application because they're inside their own application. And that seems great at first blush. I can do all this deep analysis on my own application. I can get all the core data out of it, so on and so forth. But the actual, some of the scope and differences that we have, and I'll just live at the white rows here versus the gray, is that you start to see that the app itself only has certain functional fit in your enterprise. And when it does that, it means that you can't actually analyze the rest of the business. And so you're analyzing the business in isolation. You're executing on the business in isolation, which any enterprise will tell you is that's a fatal flaw. And so ultimately you come to what we call layer agents, and layer agents are still relatively new. They're starting to mature out as a segment of the agentic population. And the layer agent's got the best capabilities to do all of this. It combines the benefits of the LLM, and it's got optimization, learns from mistakes, builds RAG, all that kind of stuff. Great. It can interact with multiple applications simultaneously, and if it's a good one, hopefully like we built Ask Cipher, it's also designed to work with the best type of connection that app agent or that app provides. And that deep connection across all your multiple applications means you can have an enterprise workflow. You can have an enterprise ROI really come out of it. And so it's partly about the connection, and it's very much about the learning. And that's why the types of AI and the way that they learn and the way that they can improve for you is actually the most important bet that you make. Not about how they are today, but how they're going to be 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. That's critical. And so you want something that's going to learn forever, grow forever, and still be yours. Super important. But then that comes to the question of, well, okay, what are you connected to? And so kind of leave it to Carlos to talk about how do we connect to these different applications.
Thank you, Johnny. And that leads nicely with how these systems are communicated. So let's dig a little bit in the historical context of how we used to communicate things. So we have SOAP, and this has been there forever. It's still being used since 1998, and it's simple object access protocol. Very, very structured, but it's very heavy. Then in the 2000s, we have REST, representational state transfer, very lightweight, widely adopted, and is pretty much the standard for the APIs model that we currently use, but not enough for what we are seeing in AI. So now in 2024, we start seeing the Model Context Protocol, MCP, and that is currently how it's being framed for AIs and the tool sets and the access of the systems. But it's not enough. Now, with the work that we are doing and the challenges that we have uncovered with creating our AI, we had to develop the next level, and it's what we call agentic layer, and it's where Ask Cipher lives. Is how an AI autonomously monitors, learn, predict, and execute across the entire tech stack of an organizational based on the knowledge that has already acquired. And that is a key vision that we are bringing to life and breaking the old models of how things need to be communicated. And that is what Ask Cipher is bringing. Moving forward, also, we need to consider the integrations that are being used in the organization, because it's not just how it communicates, but traditionally, we have used different integration methods between the systems. And we have middleware, USB style, where you plug and play different connections. This is fast, easy to deploy, but on the opposite side, limits our flexibility. Then you have the custom integrations where direct code to connect things is highly tailored, very effective, do what it needs, but is very time consuming to maintain, to build. And every time that you change something, you need to go back to that custom integration and rebuild it. So not ideal for scalability purposes. We have the persistent connections and continuous real time, fantastic to get information that you need, low latency, real life data, The con of this is complexity. It requires a lot of expertise to maintain it in the long run. And every time that you add something to your technology stack, you need to go and revisit pretty much all what you have done. Now, with Ask Cipher, we are proposing eliminate all that. Forget about it. It's no longer need. And that reason is because Ask Cipher can manage that integration based on how it's connected to all your corporate business applications. So you don't have to handle that complexity. Ask Cipher will do it for you.
Thank you. That all seems really exciting. So let's actually dive into Ask Cipher. Johnny, can you tell us about Ask Cipher and the last interface?
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is absolutely a shameless plug because our bet is that the layer is where everyone ultimately wants to live and needs to live. And so let's talk about it right from its sort of initial birth. So Ask Cipher right now connected to 3 applications, QuickBase, Salesforce, NetSuite, Google Workspace, that's 4. How many pairs of connections is that? Well, so instead of in the traditional sense that Carlos was talking about with integrations where you're going through a pipeline, now you're going really hub and spoke again. And so really you have a QuickBase to Salesforce connection, you have a Salesforce to NetSuite connection, you have a Salesforce to Google, and you have QuickBase to NetSuite, and you have and so on and so forth. And so all of those connections become combinatorially improvement. As you add more biz apps on a persistent communication and persistent integration, you start to have thousands of connections, even with dozens of pairs. And the importance of that is now that your workflow can be significantly consistent across it. And the layer allows you to do things that you couldn't do before. So for example, it can remember how your data model in QuickBase lines up with your data model in Salesforce or NetSuite. And that would be true for your Google Workspace, true for your Bamboo, true for your Coupa, true for your WMS. Pick your 3-letter acronym type application, and your layer becomes where you house your policies, your procedures, your process data that we talked about earlier. That is ultimately how you drive your business. Everything underneath it is a nuance of the application's need to function the way it needs to. And to understand this even a little bit better, let me give you a simple example. A lead record in NetSuite, for example, versus a lead record in Salesforce are completely 2 different types of records. In NetSuite, a lead record is actually a precursor to the same record, which is really the same database table of a customer record. And in Salesforce, it's an actual separate record, and the lead record looks much more like a contact record, actually. So all of a sudden, you have a very different data model on how do they interact. And so your layer allows you to control that interaction without massively customizing or awkwardly tailoring the usage of each application. It allows the applications to do what they do best, provide deep, wide functionality. And it allows you as a business to keep your policies, procedures, and design to yourself in the layer. And that's why the layer is so powerful. And that's what Ask Cipher is. So the last user interface is not about the best hamburger menu you can make or the best UI glitz and glamour you can make. It's the opposite. It's about having no UI needs at all. And it's just about something that is smart enough to understand what you need and execute across the biz apps that you're already paying for, that you already implemented, and that are, require a low-level PhD to use. Now you just take that problem away, and now you can focus on really gaining value out of that deep functionality that biz apps already provide. Now, some core principles of a layer, not just Ask Cipher, but absolutely this is for ours as well. Cipher doesn't own or store your data. The layer cannot own the data. The minute the layer owns the data, it's just another app, and it needs its own AI, and it needs its own agentic capability, on and on and on. The minute you own the data, you're no longer a layer. And so we don't own or store your data. It's strictly used to execute the action you want to do, and then it's, for all intents and purposes, forgotten except for context if you want to come back to it in the future. I mentioned how that fits into, it's not a feature. We don't do actions that the biz app cannot do natively on its own. But when you combine multiple biz apps, when you combine the LLM capabilities, it does feel like you had a whole new feature set. In fact, it feels like you have a whole new application, but yet you haven't had to learn anything, and that's the big advantage of it. And so we don't replace the business applications, and we never exceed the application's permissions. And we've really started to understand how a single small use case can provide all the ROI that an enterprise needs to adopt an AI layer like Ask Cipher. And so that one perfect action is greater than 10 messy ones is one of the core principles of our Ask Cipher layer as well. And so that gives you some idea of really what Ask Cipher is all about. And if you think about that, if you think about why we chose those core principles for it, now you're more easily able to compare apps versus a layer. And I'll let Carlos do that for you.
Thank you, Johnny. And that allow me to explain a little bit of one layer versus 100 apps and why it's so important. Let me paint a little picture, and it's based on some research back in 2022, and the numbers right now are quite different, unfortunately. And SMB currently have on average 172 applications. That is something that your organization need to learn. Each of your employees interacts with a big portions of those applications. So that's why we said 100 apps. So that is the traditional organization. Here is the biggest challenge. Every time that a person leaves, the next one needs to be trained on all those apps, all the knowledge, all the procedures, every single element to maintain the operations of your organization. And all these apps don't know your industry, don't know your business. They are separate, and we are trying to glue it based on what we were talking before, how we do the communication and integration. But that is all paradigm. That is how things used to be before. When we introduced the concept of one AI layer, what we are talking about is, imagine, and I will demonstrate it after a couple of slides, that you have an AI that is connected to your apps, like Johnny was saying, and can move data seamlessly between those apps. As well, understand your industry, understand your context, understand your goals, and knows how Carlos or Johnny or Rebecca or anybody in that organization actually execute the things, and is able to marry that with how the organization operates in their own businesses. So the person can focus now on doing the key things and the real value for the organization, and rather than being an operator of a tool. And extra, provide consistency intelligence across interactions. So when a person gets on board in an organization, the AI can actually walk them through how the things are done instead of multiple hours of training, and sometimes multiple issues and errors using the application. So that's why we introduce Ask Cipher, and that is the Ask Cipher approach. That's why we call the last user interface, because you will not need to actually go to the apps. They are not going to be replaced, but they are not going to be in the front. You will never need to learn another software interface again. So that takes us to something really important that we want to introduce, and is the memories.
So as we encourage everyone to start asking some questions, and we present a lot of information, we've covered a lot of ground. Feel free to answer questions, and we'll answer them in the Q&A panel. But I'll get the first question going here, which is really, Carlos, why don't you explain to the group why Ask Cipher's memory is fundamentally different from what we see in LLMs and LLM agents?
Absolutely, Johnny. Traditionally, LLMs, and this has changed a little bit in the last couple of months, they didn't have any memory at all. The only thing that they will remember was what was happening in the chat. in the actual active chat. And now they are starting to implement some memories, but the memory is, and their approach is based on the person type of memories, nothing related to how the business need to interact and how the structure and how the information and that memory need to be shared across the organization. What we introduced with Ask Cipher is a persistent memory structure and layered that carries the meaning across all conversations of your organization that is required until actually you delete that memory. We organize memories in different ways. We have a special system that varies between personal preference, that is just for you and how you work and operate the things, org policies, which I will be demoing in a few minutes. That is something that your organization has always have. That is your organizational policy, and you need to enforce it across all the users. So it's coming top down to the users. Business application knowledge, that knowledge of how the organization and the business work with that application in particular, your documents, and micro optimizations, how we can be more efficient utilizing the things. We govern that with a clear hierarchy. For example, our organizational policy overrides something that is in your normal preferences because it's being pushed for the organization. And that is one of the biggest difference between commercial AIs and general LLMs, and Ask Cipher is built from the ground up for the business. So we know that these cases are going to happen, and we implement it in that way. And that's why policies outranks normal preference. And we have universal schema that outranks everything else because it's the knowledge that we have embedded into our AI, how the general industry need to work, how key parameters need to be fed. So the normal organization don't need to worry about that. Most importantly, a Cipher memory can be shared across different teams, and that reduce that learning experience that usually happens with any applications. We have org-wide rules that stay consistent across all the organization, so individual preferences stay preference, and that make us usable for the organizations and scalable at the same time.
So in simple terms, LLMs remember chat, but then Ask Cipher remembers the entire organization. Is that correct, Carlos?
Exactly, Rebecca. Was meant and was created for organizations. So because of the structure and governance, it becomes smarter over time, enforces compliance automatically, and finally give the AI the foundational that it needs to work across a real business, not just your personal life. So attached to what the real organization needs and not just single users.
Awesome. Okay, thank you both for such an in-depth explanation. So can we see how Ask Cipher was designed with those in mind?
Definitely, Rebecca. Let me just bring up my demo, and we are going to do it real live. So this is actually my Ask Cipher account. Just looking confirmation that you can see it properly.
Yep.
Perfect. So the first thing that we were just talking is about the organizational policies. So let me just do the easiest example ever. I just have an example purchase order policy that I'm uploading into a Cipher, and I'm going to ask a Cipher that for this webinar, remember that org policy. So what we are going to do moving forward is governed by that. So a Cipher is going to start analyzing my request and is going to confirm that is adding the organizational policies. Okay, so it went and analyzed all the document that I fed it and gave me a couple of the highlights of what it did. There is a limit of $5,000. I need approval manager for all the PO, and there is specific limits for specific cases. And where that is if I go to my profile memory and go to organizational memory, I can now see that policy in my memory, right? So one of the first things that I like to always poke around is let's try to be mischievous and let's try to create something that the policy is preventing to do. Because the policy says the limit is 5,000. So I'm going to say, okay, let's create a PO in NetSuite. I'm connected to NetSuite right now, and ask all the questions that need to create that PO. So right now, it's starting to analyze my request. And as you can see, is checking the organizational policies to see if I'm, oh, hold on, policy violation. I am requesting something that my policy is telling me explicitly you should not be doing because my limit is 5,000. And it's giving me a couple of options of what you can do. You can split it into multiple POs, okay? I can request an exception, or I can reduce the scope and do a standard. So I actually not going to do any of those. I'm going to, okay, I make a mistake, fat finger, my bad, I'm going to create one that is just for $500. And let's do it the same. So here's the first couple of things. I was very, very generic. I didn't even mention to which vendor was this this PO or what I'm going to do. So it knows from the configurations of my systems what I need to enter. So I'm going to say, okay, the vendor name is Carlos Palacio. And he's going to start looking into the system. Okay, now he needs what is your category? So my category is actually professional services. And he's actually in real time talking to my business systems to gather what information need to be. Okay, need a description. So this is AI consulting for Ask Cipher. And as you can see, the scope of work and deliverables is required by policy. That's why it's also enforcing these type of questions. Quantity, so it will be 10 hours of $50. And it's already based on my initial conversation saying, okay, you wanted to put it for 500. So perfect, it does a validation, 10 hours, 50 an hour is 500, so you're good. And your business justification for this, and based on my policy also knows that it's going to go to the memo field. So this is going to be okay. The department is today. The delivery date is going to be today. And I'm going to say not require any extra documents. And now it's confirming that it's going to pull the NetSuite purchase order requirements and create a PO for us. And now it's starting to search for that particular vendor. It confirmed that found the vendor and is confirming that no information is missing. And is asking me to confirm that all the information is correct. Vertical is corporate, location is Canada, department is executive office. Now, I want to highlight the department that I initially put was not one of the departments available, so it actually showed me what is available. And now it's creating a PO for us. And I'm going to show a little trick that for people that constantly are creating POs on the same basis and on the same parameters. Perfect. If finished, give me the link because I want to validate that it was created and it was created properly. Okay, so actually give me the link in NetSuite. And as you can see, my PO was just created. Here is because I'm going to be creating similar POs very often. I'm going to say, remember all this information for the next PO creation. And is starting to save all this information that I already gave and use. So the next time you will not need to ask all these questions. And just confirm. And if I go to the memory and my personal memories, I can see that it actually remember all the things. And why is that important? Because now if I say, okay, let's just create another PO. And this time, let's just say is for 100. It should vendor Carlos Eduardo Palacio Silva. And it's just asking me the things that knows that most likely are going to be different. And as you can see, would you like to use the same account? So he knows that in the memory, I have been creating POs as I asked to remember. Yes, please use all the information on. So I don't need to actually enter it over and over. Use the suggested. And now is ready to create a PO. So initially, the first time that was learning from what I do took around 5 minutes. Now in less than 2 minutes, I can create an XPO. So that is the power of the memories. That is the power of pushing organizational policies to enforce the work that we do. And I don't actually need to know how NetSuite operates, what fields were mandatory or what's required. Everything is enforced by Ask Cipher. Now, I'm going to show even something more interesting. Right now, we were just talking about one system. We are using NetSuite in the PO case, but I have also Salesforce connected to my environment. And people make mistakes entering information in one environment versus the other. Sometimes typos, sometimes forget to copy. So I'm going to ask Cipher, could you please compare Appficiency account in NetSuite versus Salesforce and present a table with the. So I'm asking, okay, at the same time, go to two of my business systems, locate a particular account and compare it and show me the differences. This is just as an illustration. We can do any type of action in those two systems that are allowed by the system. So as you can see right now, is getting the full details from Appficiency customer in NetSuite, and now is creating the table for us. And is presenting the key differences between the two accounts. So that is where we were talking about the integration and the communication, the change of the paradigm that a Cipher is pushing now. You don't need to do these interconnections, custom connection, integration. That is past. Now a Cipher can rule and govern all those communications and connections between your apps and enforce organizational policies and knows how I operate, remember what I'm doing, and allow me to be more efficient and dedicate my time to something that is really valuable for the organization and not just the operation. Any questions from the audience?
Let's see here. So when you say that Cipher learns from mistakes, what does that actually look like day to day?
Thank you for that question. When Cipher learns from mistakes, if I ask Cipher to perform an action and is try to do it in one system and it cannot, it will try different ways to do it until it finds the possible way, and it will report back. Other clear example is the administrator changed and now a field is mandatory, and that Cipher was not aware, and it was trying to create something or was trying to do the action and he couldn't, and then he realized, oh, now I need this information, and he will learn from it, so the next time it will not make the same mistake. You're muted, Rebecca.
Thank you. How do you handle it when someone's NetSuite setup is completely customized? I'm assuming this person means their personalizations. So how does Cipher figure that out?
So Cipher is able to connect to your NetSuite and already have a pre-set up of what is a vanilla deployment. And based on the interactions, it will start learning what customizations, what different settings have been enabled for that particular instance. And every time will be smarter and more attached to how that environment is. So the longer that it is interacting with that environment, the more effective it is.
Amazing. Okay. Just taking a look at the other questions here. So how do you ensure the learnings from the interactions between AI and user remain private and unintentional IP leaks create a risk? What is the rationale?
So let me see if I understood. Has multiple parts of that question. So the first is how we ensure that things stay private. So the first is the memories that we organize are at different levels. The first is the personal. That is just for that particular individual. That is not shared across the organization or across a Cipher. That is the first. The second are organizational type of memories, the policies and guidelines for the usage of the particular BSAPs. So that is shared across just that organization. So there is literally hard walls that information should not cross different organizations. And the third one is the general industry and information that is cascaded to all organizations, and that is just shared across us as Cipher. Second, how the AI is structured is not keeping any of the information of your organization that is data from your BSAPs. As you remember in part of the presentation is the information of the BSAP is in the BSAP. So that is key for the IP, that is key for the privacy of the organization. So we are a layer above, and that helps us with the privacy and the security as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Johnny, are there any questions that you answered here that you'd like to touch on verbally?
I think that the only one I wanted to expound upon a little bit was just the concept that everyone's asking about. What's the difference between why not just make another custom integration or another custom agent or application? And we believe the future is going to have many of those. We believe that, and it's not just we believe, the data shows that there's a proliferation of the capability of building agents. Companies might go back in this super cycle of IT back to building their own agents, their own applications, and by all means, the development costs and the capability to do so is at their fingertips. But that still requires a vast translation pool. It still requires really a layer to orchestrate. And so we're here to provide the layer, work at the layer level, and then let the applications and the agents all be very, plug and play type infrastructure that can be used by any given company.
And you're touching a very important point, Johnny, and probably I have to stress it more when we were talking about the hundreds of apps. It's not only apps. Now, a lot of companies believe that putting their own agent into your app and your AI is giving more and more. But then for the organizations, you have not only the app, but you have 100 individual agents, and that is not helping with the complexity problem because people now need to interact with 100 agents. So it's not reducing the universe, it's not helping the business. When you approach it as a AI layer, sounds a little bit Lords of the Ring, want to rule them all, basically. So you don't need to be concerned about so many apps, so many agents. They are all attached and communicating with Ask Cipher.
I like that. Okay, well, with that, I will leave you to continue your day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this webinar. I hope that you got something out of it, that you learned something new about AI today. I know I surely did. So thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Carlos. Do you want to plug Ask Cipher and the waitlist?
Sure. For anyone that's interested in taking a look at it and its capabilities, feel free to go to www.askcipher.com. Cipher with an I, not a Y. And you're welcome to join the waitlist. We are accepting waitlists as we move towards full production release on January 1. We're a little ahead of schedule. So we're very excited to start sharing customer use cases next year. And you're welcome to be part of the group that gets to get their hands on the layer first. So please come join us on our journey. We think this is going to be really a very exciting new phase in IT and AI.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you,
a wonderful
everyone.
day, everyone.
Thank you,
everyone.
Rebecca.
Bye.
Thank you, Rebecca.